welcome to our book club event for May. It's lovely to see so many of you here, lots of familiar faces, which is nice to see. And we've got lots of people joining us at home online as well, which is lovely. So the evening is split into two parts. We have our book club talk for the first 45 minutes and a small break. And then it's our panel discussion, which is about women's health this evening. So first of all, it's at our book club section with our author of the month. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this evening by the lovely Lucy Clarke, who is the author of The Surf House. Lucy is the queen of the destination thriller, and her 9 novels have sold over 1 million copies in the UK alone. Several of her books have been adapted for the screen, including No Escape for Paramount Plus and The Castaways, which I'm sure many of you have seen, which starred the BAFTA award-winning actress Sheridan Smith. Another 3 are currently in development, I believe, which is very exciting. Her latest novel is The Surf House, which is, as many of you will know, have read it, a dark, twisty, quite sexy, I would say, thriller set in Morocco. And we'll be talking more about that in a minute. When Lucy isn't travelling the world as research for her books, she writes from a beach hut on the south coast, which I think sounds absolutely idyllic. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you.
So Lucy and I will be chatting for about half an hour, and then there'll be a chance to put your questions to her. And if you're at home, you can do that using the chat facility online. And someone will read those out for you, or you can appear on screen if you'd like to, whatever you prefer. So to kickstart, can I ask you to do sort of a 30-second trailer for The Surf House, for anyone who's not read it?
Absolutely. So The Surf House is about a model called Bee who you meet at a point where her life just implodes on a photo shoot in Marrakesh, and she walks out of there into the souks where something terrible happens to her, and she is rescued effectively by another woman, a British woman, who brings her back to the sanctuary of the Surf House, which is this beautifully rustic cliff-top house on the coast in a remote section of Morocco. And what appears to be a place of real charm and beauty and soulfulness quickly begins to reveal cracks about what the Surf House is all about and who runs it. And I will just leave it there, I think, as a taster.
Sounds good. So as I mentioned, you are all about the destination, aren't you? So will you tell us, how important is the setting for you, for your books, and how do you go about choosing them?
I think that for me, because when you write a novel, you effectively spend a year or more just living that world of it. And I have to feel really passionately about that place that I'm setting it, because that's where I'm going to be in my head for the next year. And I think as well, when I go into a bookshop and I choose a book I want to read, I'm very much driven by, again, like, where do I want to be in a sense of place and feeling. So that's definitely a consideration. And then I need to think about whether, if I've got a hook for a story, with The Surf House, I knew I wanted to set a book, do something to do with surfing. The novel isn't about surfing per se, it's very much the backdrop, but it's a world that I'm interested in. I think there's an edge to it I wanted to explore in a thriller sense. And Morocco, for me and for this book, felt like a really interesting destination, because it's not the first place you think of to surf necessarily. I like that it has that sense of kind of inbuilt threat and beauty at the same time. And I'm always interested in that line between a sort of very wildly beautiful place, but also one that holds menace. So Morocco felt like the perfect spot for this book.
Yeah, I think the souks and everything is perfect, isn't it? Because it is it has a sort of thrilling feel to it. Yeah, absolutely. And you do such a brilliant job of evoking a sort of the landscape. How do you go about creating that sense of place?
I think for me, as you said, Jo, the favourite part of my job is always going on the research trip. That's definitely the best bit. Let's forget the 1 year of kind of writing in your pajamas and scratching your head. But the research trip is part of every book that I write. As Jo said, I've written, this is my 9th destination thriller, and I've been to all the locations wherever I set a book. So the one before was The Hike, and it was set in Norway. So I spent, I got my backpack on and went off hiking for 5 nights in the mountains. It's very important that I feel like I know the terrain that my characters will be living in, so I know how they will respond to it. So in the surf house, being set in Morocco, I'd recently learned to surf after I had I've got 2 children who are now 8 and 10, and I had a few like back issues and all the rest of it after having kids. And sort of in my mid-30s, I was like, I would really love to learn to surf and get strong and fit. And I think sometimes it's that time post childhood, like post having your children, that you as a woman sometimes start something new. And for me, surfing felt like the thing. We live by the coast near to Bournemouth, and I've got my husband's a professional windsurfer, lots of my friends surf, and it's just something I'd never done. And I thought, I am going to give this a go, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I have no brilliant skills or I wouldn't say I'm a real natural, but I love it so much. And I felt like that passion and that beginner's mindset that you have when you start something later on in life, I really wanted to explore that in the novel as well. So I went for my research trip for this book. I went to Morocco, stayed in this really cool little beach town called Imswan, which is loosely where the novel is based upon. I fictionalized the name in the book because it's almost like the Imswan of 20 years ago when there was no tourism.
Right, yeah.
So I quite often do that in novels. I will go and do the research trip and I will have all the details pretty much completely like as they are, but then I want to use some artistic license and change them and adapt it to suit the purposes of the story. So I fictionalized the name. So I spent a week. I could have spent so much longer, but I had to leave my 2 little children at home. So that was, my maximum amount of time that I could happily be away from them for. And so, I spent a week surfing and traveling and just drinking in as much as I possibly could, writing it all down, taking photos, leaving myself voice memos, absorbing, and then came home and created mood boards. I've got a huge mood board. It's no longer the surf house one, it's for my next book, in my office. And then it just helps me bring it all back to life when I'm working from home.
I love the sound of your mood boards. I heard you talk about this before. Would you tell us a bit more about that? Because I think it's fascinating. What goes onto the mood board? I'm
a very visual writer, so I very much see the book playing out as I'm writing, as if it's on screen. So mood boards for me are a big part of the process. So it doesn't have to be things that look exactly like they will do necessarily in the book itself, but it's like about creating a tone or an atmosphere that reflects the book. So I will pull out images. So for the surf house, lots of kind of like dusky red, sunsetty pictures, grainy surf shots. There's a picture. My mum came into my room like a few months ago. She's like, "Why have you got a picture of a topless girl in your mood board?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's just like a feeling for the book." And just anything that makes me feel a certain way, that is the emotions I want to pick up on in the novel. And in the mornings, when you get to your desk and you're a bit sort of sleepy and yawny still, it's really nice to just make a cup of tea, and the first thing I do is I just stand in the office looking at the mood board, just absorbing it, and it just helps to kind of bring it to life afresh each morning. So I love doing that.
Oh, I love that. I guess it gets you in the zone, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And the only words actually that I have on my mood board is I will write at the very beginning of a book what I think the blurb will be, which is what's written on the back cover, and I'll write the blurb and I have it on my mood board, and it'll be a bit of an anchor point to come back to check that I haven't lost the focus of what I think the book is about. Yeah. And it might be that will shift, but I will keep coming back to it to try and make sure I've kept the same sort of path through the writing. Yeah.
What was the blurb for the surf house, if you can remember?
The surf house. Oh, do you know what?
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
I can't really remember because the one that I look at every day is for the new book now. So I can't quite remember, but it's not too dissimilar to what is on the back of the book, actually. But I didn't stray too far, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And I know in the past you've used music as well, haven't you? What did you use music for the surf house?
Yes, I did.
What did you have?
I use a lot of like electronic, how would I describe it? Like lo-fi, like Paracurva is one of the artists that I listen to a lot, and it's music that typically doesn't have many lyrics. it's quite distilled, and it more, again, it's like comes back to emotion. It more creates a feel for me. Sometimes with music I'll play around, and if I've done this in the past, when I've got two key protagonists, I might have two separate playlists for them, so that when I'm writing in their voice, I can step quite cleanly into the other character's voice. So that helps. But I didn't do that for the Surf House. It was just, again, more a feeling. I did experiment with playing Moroccan music.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know why, I just felt like every time I played it just felt wrong. Like I was just like a tourist sitting in a bar. So I quickly stopped that. Yeah.
And I think you also, I've heard you talk about using the 5-point star method. Will you tell us a bit about that? Because I think it's a really good tip for anyone who's sort of an aspiring writer.
It's really interesting, because I haven't talked about that for a long time. But it's something that I used to always do when I worked more by hand on my first drafts. Yeah. So at the top of a manuscript, I would always draw a star and just write the 5 senses around it. So, sight, smell, sound, touch, taste. And it was just a tiny prompt for me as a writer to write in a sensory way, because it's really easy to just write what you see in your head and not what what you feel. So I would do that. And now I used to write my first drafts by hand, and I tend not to do that so much now. I do all of my planning in journals, all my character work. Like at the moment, I'm doing a first draft of my new book, and the free flow, as I call it, goes straight onto the computer now. But at the end of each day, I'll then plan the next chapters that I'm going to do, and that always happens in a journal. So I do a bit of a mix. But yeah, just a 5-point star is just a really helpful reminder to think about all of the senses.
I think you're really good at that. I think that's why you do such a good sense of place, because it is all the senses. Good, absolutely. Thank you. So this is a bit of a spoiler for anyone who's not read the end of the book, but the Surf House touches on female violence, doesn't it? Is that something that you were sort of interested in exploring?
Do you know, it wasn't, I didn't set out to do that at all. No, I very much... There's a scene with some violence at the beginning of the novel. It opens with quite a kind of bang. And then, some more kind of expression of that later on. But no, it wasn't something I set out to do. It was as the character, whose name I won't mention so that there aren't spoilers too much. It's just the way she came to me. And I just felt like my novels, although I'm in the thriller kind of sphere, I'm actually quite low on like body count and gritty stuff and death. I'm more interested in the emotional journey of my characters, and in this particular book I think it's probably a bit darker and a little bit, a couple of more violent aspects to it. And again, like I say, it didn't set out to be that way. It just felt right as the story progressed.
Yeah. It just feels like it's a bit of a move away. And I think it's happened across the thriller genre, that, women as victims, which, there's classic books, opening scenes where there's a woman running through a forest or, locked in a room and she doesn't know where she is, that kind of thing. And I feel like we're moving away from that bit to where women are the perpetrators.
Yes.
And I don't know if you feel like that's a positive change, almost like a feminist act, possibly.
Absolutely. I mean, I wonder whether subconsciously that's part of the journey of it, because, when I began writing sort of 10, 12 years ago, I think it was very common to have the kind of like trembling female, no one believes you. And I really love the empowerment of very strong women leads that we see now, and it's not always men who are the perpetrators of crime. So I think I enjoy reading about those type of women who bring a kind of strength and difference. And so it's probably kind of natural that it's found its way into what I'm writing, because I think it's always a reflection. What you end up writing is, we were just talking about it, is what you love reading, really.
Yeah. I mean, that leads me on to my next question. Did you start out writing thrillers right from the beginning, or did you ever write in another genre?
No, I mean, what's really interesting is it's kind of how your publisher packages you, because I think I've always written a very similar type of book, in that the destination comes first, the emotional journeys of my characters are key, and there's usually some kind of thrilling like crime element to it, but not police procedural stuff, not criminals per se. But when I started out, I think I was packaged more, because the market's changed, I was packaged more as book club fiction. Then as psychological thrillers took off, I was kind of moved into the more psychological thriller. That's how it'd be packaged. And then more recently, it's been a bit like, do you know what? What I'm actually really doing is writing thrillers set in exotic destinations. Let's call you a destination thriller writer. And that's what I am. But, you know, the market will shift and change. And I think ultimately, I will always just write the type of book that I love writing. And then, you know, my publishers who are here tonight would probably say, and then it'll be our job to work out how to kind of package and position them from there. But I think my books will always involve strong female leads, places that I'm passionate about, and hopefully emotional journeys that are interesting and relatable, that you know, that hopefully that resonate with our own experiences.
And why do you think thrillers are so popular? You know, I feel like they're just getting more and more popular, aren't they? What do you think draws people to them?
I don't have a good answer for you, Jo. I'm mystified by this myself. I enjoy reading thrillers. I typically don't choose dark thrillers. We were talking earlier and I said Lisa Jewell's one of my favourite thriller writers, and some of her books have become really dark recently, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do it, but they're so good that I, you know, absolutely love them. I wonder, I mean, I think for me, when I come to a thriller, I don't need high body counts and lots of grit and people locked in dark rooms. I just need to believe fully in the characters and have some sort of mystery to solve, whether that's emotionally driven or a crime. And I think that's the journey that I like to go on, is I want to feel like I'm solving that mystery alongside the characters. And then you feel it feels good.
I agree. And I don't know if you find this, but does writing these sort of dark books and, you know, writing about these people who don't have the best intentions, do they? Does that ever colour your worldview?
Not at all.
No,
it doesn't. I think that my books if there is something that is, I would say, similar throughout all of them, is that I generally like to end, because this is just how my mindset is, on something quite uplifting.
Right.
And so even though there's darkness in all of my books, I like to feel that actually the journey has brought light. So it doesn't colour my feeling. I don't sit down and it's a beautiful sunny day and I think, I've got to go into a deep dark world. Or no, I don't. And
all these awful people.
No. And I think mostly I like books with characters that you can really root for and love. And of course you have antagonists in there who might be difficult company too, but ultimately most of the characters, I hope, are likable, if not flawed, which makes kind of having their company for a year much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine. And will you tell us a bit about when you first knew you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I really made that decision in my mid-20s. So it wasn't a childhood passion or dream. I just didn't see the signs, actually, because I used to always keep journals, was a real diary writer and journal writer. And I did study English literature at university, but only because it was a subject that I was better at than anything else. I didn't know what I wanted to do and it felt broad. But it wasn't until I was away traveling in my mid-20s, I'd already started a career in advertising, which I didn't enjoy at all. And I used to keep a list on my computer at work that was headed things I would rather be doing. And it got very long, this list. And I ended up realizing that advertising probably wasn't for me and I should just go and have some time and work out what I did want to do. So I went traveling and I was with my boyfriend at the time, and we had 6 months and very little money. And we got a car in LA and we drove across America and Canada and flew home from New York. And we slept in our car most of the time because we couldn't afford motels, and we hiked a lot, again, because it's the only free thing to do. And I kept a travel journal during that time. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved writing about our trip. And when I got home, I had fallen in love with traveling and I'd fallen in love with writing. And I just said, I do not want to go back to advertising in a career I didn't love. I want to try my hand at writing. So I went to the local library in Christchurch, where I'm from, and I got out all the books about how to write a novel. And I read them. And I would also read other writers' novels that I loved and highlight and annotate them to work out how they made these great books. And then I just did it and had a go. And my first book that I wrote didn't get published. I managed to get an agent and become represented, but we didn't get a book deal. And then I said, is that it? Are you going to drop me now? Like I didn't have, we didn't do very well. And she's like, no, you just go away and you take a deep breath, Lucy, and you write your next book. And so I thought, well, the only thing I have now to write about, I haven't got much life experience, is what it's like keeping a travel journal and traveling around for 6 months with no money. And that led me to write my debut, which was The Sea Sisters, about a girl backpacking, and her body sadly is found at the bottom of a cliff in Bali, and her possessions are flown back to her sister, including her travel journal. And her sister retraces her footsteps through her journal to uncover what happened. And that was the book that sold. And it sold all over the world, to HarperCollins here in the UK, but it sold internationally with big auctions. And it was ridiculous because after, having all the rejections with the first book and thinking, oh, I'll never make this work. And then the second book just blew up, and you don't
just never know.
You never know. No. Yeah.
And what kept you motivated? Because that's hard, isn't it, to have that kind of rejection?
Yeah.
What kept you going?
It was hard because but when I made the decision to write in my mid-20s, when I was traveling, it was 5 years to getting my first book deal.
Yeah.
So it took me 2.5 years to do each book alongside having a job. Because obviously you have to earn money while you do it. I think the key thing for me was when my first book was rejected, it was realizing I absolutely loved writing and I wanted to do it whatever, whether I got published or not.
Yeah.
And I think I put all this pressure on myself that, if your first book doesn't get published, then that's it. You're not going to be a writer. And it was my husband who was just like, it could be your 4th book that gets picked up, or your 10th book, or do you know what? Maybe none of them. But if you're loving the journey of it, what does it matter?
Yeah.
And it just took all the pressure off me. I'm one of those people that heaps the pressure on them, and it just took it away. And I was like, well, cool, I'm just going to keep on doing it because I love it.
So you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
If anything else happens,
it's
it's bonus. Yeah, that's really nice. And if you had to give an aspiring writer sort of one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the advice that I follow with every book, actually, not just as a new writer, but for when I'm approaching a new book idea, even now I'm working on book 10. I have a handwritten note that I wrote when I was unpublished on, I've got another board in my office. It isn't my kind of book mood board, but it's like my sort of authory mood board, let's call it. And it says, write the type of book that you want to read. And I think that is really important because the market changes all the time. And as I said earlier on, I'm writing kind of similar books that I've always written, but the way they're packaged is very different. But that core thing of being passionate about your subject, writing something that feels like you, it just comes across on the page. So I think when you're approaching your work, or even the work in progress that you have, if you've already begun, it's just sense checking that, would I pick up this book? What is it about it that makes me want to be a reader for it? And then that will come through in the writing.
That's really good advice. Brilliant. And you mentioned earlier you've got 2 fairly young children. How do you sort of combine that, being a mum with working?
It's a lovely job for having children, actually, because I'm very lucky because I have my husband and I co-parent. So I kind of got my first book deal round like a little bit before I had children. And it was always the conversation of, I've just finally got this career that I really want. I'm going to carry on working. Are you happy to co-parent? And we just said we'd do it all 50-50.
Yeah.
So I'm a morning person. So I work before the kids were at school, I would just get up and work from 6 until 12:30.
Yeah.
And then we switch, and Jim would work from 12:30 till 5:30.
Yeah.
So, and that worked for us.
Yeah.
And I think now they're at school, you have a little bit extra, but I do my writing in the morning and I pick them up at 3:00 and that's it. There's no emails or whatever. I'm try and be fairly strict about it. Just because I don't want to be like on my phone when they're in the room. And it's nice to have a divide as well and just switch off. So, and they're really curious. I'm really lucky to have 2 readers. They're so passionate about books. And I think it's that thing of they always see me reading. So, after school, quite often we don't tend to do loads of clubs after school or anything. It'll be like We've got a hammock in the garden at the moment, so it's like, let's get a hammock and read,
That
and it's
sounds
just
idyllic.
it's really lovely. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy that they've become passionate readers.
And there's nothing quite like having a hard deadline of like school pickup to
Yeah.
focus the mind.
Absolutely, yeah. You know your day
I think
ends
people
at
get more
3.
done, don't they? Once
But
they have
sometimes
kids.
it's really annoying because I've had a rubbish writing day and been really sluggish, and then you just get into your stride at like 2:30, and I'm like, oh no. And then I walk into the school run, and quite often other mums will be like, oh, hi Lou, how you doing, blah blah. And like I just realised my head is completely somewhere else, so I now try and finish work like 5 minutes before school pickup, to like be a bit present when I arrive at the school gate and not a million
You're thinking
miles
of murder.
away. Yeah, exactly.
You won't believe what I'm. Before I hand over to the audience, are you able to tell us a bit about book 10?
Yes.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah, book 10 is set in a very wild place that some of you may or may not have heard of, called the Azores. They're islands off the coast of Portugal, very kind of remote, wild islands in the middle of the Atlantic. And this novel is about a group of friends who end up finding themselves, for various reasons, living on a plot of land off-grid in the Azores.
Right.
And it's what I'm quite interested in exploring in this book is that it's kind of, I suppose, the millennial disenchantment with city living, and how there's a real yearning in lots of us to simplify and just pull away from the consumerism and the materialism, but actually what that looks like in reality when it happens. And if you get your dream of just cutting off and going, what really goes on.
Right.
So that's what I'm exploring.
That sounds great. Does it have a name yet?
It's called Someplace Wild.
Oh, okay. I love
my
that.
working title. That might change.
Okay, yeah. And a pub date, or is it too far away?
No, I don't have a pub date yet.
I'll have to be patient.
Yeah, but coming soon.
Okay, that's very exciting. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, right at the front there.
I think there's a microphone making its way to you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, now that you're on book 10, would you ever consider going back to book 1 and, knowing what you know now, rewriting or trying to get it published again?
Yeah, do you know, I reread the book that was unpublished about 5 years ago, and it was interesting because I thought that very thing, would I return to it and redo it and improve it? And I read it and I just felt like that was a moment in time, and I was much younger when I wrote it, and I can see now why it didn't get picked up to be published. And I think to go back and work on it would no longer feel fresh and exciting, and like the concept that it was set around, I can see now as a more experienced writer that would have been a slog to make it work, and it just wasn't the right hook to start the novel off. So no, I wouldn't return to that book. Thank you.
You say you're a destination writer. Do you have a list that you're ticking off? or is it sort of you finish a book and think, oh, I know what I'll do, I'll go there?
Yeah, great question. I definitely, so when I first started writing, I used to write about destinations that I'd already traveled to. And now I've used them all up. So everywhere else are new places. So Norway for the hike was new. And this, the surf house, Morocco, I hadn't been to when I had the idea. And again, the novel I'm working on now, the Azores, I spent last Easter there because I'd had the idea for the book. So I am definitely thinking more about places that interest me, that maybe I've not been, I've read about, heard people talking about. And I'm thinking, I'll put that destination in my mind, let it percolate alongside other book ideas that I'm thinking of. I have a list on my computer of just loads, like 50 ideas. And I'll sort of marry those two things and see if a destination jumps out for the hook. But they are always places that I want to go. I would never set a book somewhere that I'm not that interested in. So, so there's a few. I think there's got to be a book soon set in New Zealand. That's somewhere I want to go.
Okay. Oh.
Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. We've got one from online, which is, do you read each one of your books once published with a copy in your hand in your hammock?
Oh, that's nice. Do you know, that sounds so lovely. And I absolutely don't do that. And I think it's because by the time you finish the book and it's published, you are so sick of it. And, you know, I've read it so many times by then. But what I have done recently is I reread 2 or 3 of my backlist titles because I was just quite interested to see if my style had shifted over the years. And that felt really nice to just go back, jump in time. And also the great thing is that my memory isn't very good. So I'd forgotten a lot of the plot twists. I was like, oh, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Okay, when you have a book adapted for screen, how does that feel? I mean, do the characters appear as you would envisage them appearing? And if not, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, the book to screen adaptation process has been really exciting. It's been a real highlight actually of my career to have things adapted. And when you go into that adaptation process, I very much had to say to myself, you are letting go of all creative control here, because of course, when a book is adapted, it is a complete reimagining, and it's someone, and not even someone else's ideas, it's a team of like 100 people's ideas as to what that book looks like and those characters look like. And the 2 novels that have so far been adapted have been made into series. And what's quite interesting for me about a series adaptation is that they are wildly different often to books, because a novel typically makes 2 hours of television, but No Escape, which is the first one that was adapted, was a 7-parter, 7 hours. So much extra content that you have to fill. So I was really open to it, and I think if I have made a decision, I was very comfortable with the different twists and turns that the director and the screenwriters and the actors brought to it. And it was just so fascinating to kind of be along for the ride and to enjoy a whole new world that I knew nothing about. And it was a privilege to go out onto set, and I was able to bring my kids and husband onto set and see it all. So the whole thing, I mean, particularly the first time, because for No Escape, it was a huge big budget production that was filmed in Thailand for 7 months. No Escape is set on a yacht. It's actually set in the book in the Philippines. And it's about a crew of travelers sailing on this yacht, and one of them goes overboard. And it's a question of, was it an accident or was it murder? And to be out there on set, and just, I remember being taken out on a boat, on this like luxurious motorboat, to the yacht that I had created in the book, this beautiful old sort of 100-foot yacht. It felt like someone had just plucked it from my imagination and just put it on this incredible anchorage in Thailand. And there were 10 other boats all moored around it, like a drone boat, police boat, diving boat. It just was like going into a completely different world. So many experiences like that are just, you know, I never imagined for one moment that would happen when I decided I'd like to try and see if I could write a book. So for the downside is that the end product might not be as it is in the book, and it's always going to be different. But I think there's so much kind of joy along the way of the process that I'm okay with all of it, and I kind of welcome it, because it's lovely to see into someone else's imagination what the shape of the book could look like reimagined.
Yeah. Do you have a say in casting at all, or is it all kind of quite separate?
On paper, in a contract, you do.
Yeah.
I'm actually with casting. So when I got the call that Sheridan Smith was going to play the lead, Laurie, in The Castaways, Sheridan's actually a little bit older than I've written Laurie, and we wrote it into the script that she's her accent is a northern accent, and her sister in the book and in the show is a southern accent. And we just added it into the script because we're like, we want Sheridan. She's amazing. You know, she'll do a beautiful job. And I didn't have any say in casting other than the producers will then say, oh, look, this is who we're looking at casting. What do you think? Yeah. And for me, like, the only part of the job that I'm good at is the writing. I don't know anything about, I don't actually even own a television, so I don't know who's who. I'm the worst person to ask. So I was like, you're really good at that bit. So you do that.
You're the expert.
I'll just keep with story and we'll make it work. So yeah, the casting was over to them.
Yeah. Oh, the question at the back there.
Hi, you mentioned writing books that you'd want to read. Who are some authors who inspire you? Which books?
Wow. Oh, so many. So I love reading thrillers. And if I'm talking about thriller genre, I love Sabine Durant. I really like Jane Harper, who writes Place beautifully. But I read and enjoy literary fiction as well. And one of my favourite authors is Tim Winton, who's an Australian writer. And he writes Place just so beautifully. I don't know anyone actually that writes Place as well as him. His books aren't for everyone. They're not very plot driven. But they're so beautiful. The language is incredible. And my other favourite literary writer is Maggie O'Farrell. And I loved her from her very first book when it first came out. And I remember I was in Chile when a friend passed it to me and she said, "You must read this book." And I just remember sobbing. We were in a really deserted place in Chile in the mountains. And I just, when you have a book that really speaks to you and you love and you remember how you felt and where you were when you read it. And ever since then, I've loved Maggie O'Farrell and read everything that she's ever written. And she's the only author I've ever written a fan letter to, actually. I wrote her letter years ago. And she wrote back. She wrote a little postcard back to me. That's really sweet. I've never met her. I hope one day to. Yeah. But she is. I really like her approach. She's very off grid, and she comes online when she needs to, and that's it. Yeah. But she's a wonderful writer. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question if we have anything. Oh, over that.
Thanks. Hello. Can I just ask about the destinations and about which has been the easiest to write, your favourite to write? Is there one that really sticks out that you wish you could visit again?
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily the destination that I'd visit again, although I love it's One of the Girls was my easiest and most favourite writing experience I've ever had. It's set in Greece. It's 6 friends go on a hen weekend to a Greek villa. And you know from the beginning that one of them is going to kill by the end of the 4 nights. And I had the idea, I did no planning for the book. Normally I would plan, but I just wrote down the names of 6 women. I spent 2 days thinking it's 4 nights, it's Greece, it's a villa. One of them is going to kill by the end. Let's go. And I did a free flow draft of it in 17 days during lockdown, the first lockdown, and I had a 70,000 word draft at the end of it.
It's amazing.
It was so quick, and I don't normally write like that at all. I mean, the books normally they're sort of bled out of me. This one just flowed, and I would love to replicate the experience because it was like being in love. Like every day I felt fluttery and like I needed to get back to my desk, and I'd get downstairs at 12:30 when my kids were still not in school. Oh, it was lockdown, so they went to school. And I'd swap with my husband and I'd just be like, I just written 5,000 words and they're not rubbish. I think they're good. So that was such a fun writing experience. And I loved it. And I think that my favourite book destination wise to write was No Escape, which is the one set on the yacht, because that was set in the Philippines. And when I had the idea for it, it was just before I had children. I finished the book pregnant, but I didn't know how to sail and I'd never been to the Philippines. And so I learnt to sail, and I was free and young and didn't have kids then. So I spent 6 weeks backpacking around the Philippines and going on meeting sailors and sailing with them. And so it was a really exciting research experience that didn't need to be crammed into a small kind of modified time because of having family commitments. So I think those 2 stand out for different reasons. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for your brilliant questions. And thank you especially to Lucy for being with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.